So yeah, the sutta for today, it's Anguttara Nikaya 539, that we have translated as cannot endure. So it starts by the Buddha addressing the bhikkhus and giving the comparison with the bull elephant that is not worthy and worthy of a king. Obviously the sutta is not very, very long or complex, but it does raise some interesting points about the whole nature of samadhi and where the samadhi comes from, to put it that way. So the examples the Buddha gave, it starts by saying how the royal bull elephant cannot endure sights. And it is when a royal bull elephant gone to the battle falters and founders at the sight of a division of elephants, of cavalry, of chariots, of infantry. It doesn't stay firm and fails to plunge into a battle. That's how a royal bull elephant cannot endure sights. How can that royal bull elephant not endure sounds? And then goes the same. It's when it's gone to the battle, it flinches, falters at the sound of division of elephants, the thunder of drums, the kettle drums, the horns. Basically, it gets scared. It doesn't stay firm. Fails to plunge into the battle. How is the royal bull elephant? How can the royal bull elephant not endure smells? Says it is when a royal bull elephant gone to the battle falters, founders, when it smells the odor of the feces, urine of the battle-hardened pedigree royal bull elephants. It doesn't stay firm. How cannot endure tastes? And it goes the same. When it's basically during the battle, it misses a meal, grass, water, misses 2, 3, 4, 5 meals. It doesn't stay firm, gives in, the mind gets overwhelmed. How is the royal bull elephant cannot endure touches? It's when he's prodded by the arrows, spears, gets hit, cannot stay firm. So it cannot remain unmoved. So elephant that has not been trained in remaining unmoved in those 5 ways is the elephant that's not worthy of a king, not worthy of a, not worthy to go into battle. So in the same way, a bhikkhu with 5 qualities is not worthy of offerings dedicated to the gods, not worthy of hospitality, not worthy of religious donation, not worthy of veneration with joint palms, and it's not the supreme field of merit for the world. What 5? When a bhikkhu cannot endure sight, sound, smell, taste, and touches. So now, when it comes to the bhikkhu, the sutta says that bhikkhu cannot endure sights. When seeing a sight with their eyes, he is aroused by a desirable sight. He's not able to compose the mind as a result of that. That's how a bhikkhu cannot endure sights. How is it that a bhikkhu cannot endure sounds? It is when a bhikkhu, hearing a sound with their ears, is aroused by a desirable sound. Thus, he cannot compose the mind. So the lack of composure is the result of that arousal, pretty much. Same goes for the smells. When smelling an odor with the nose is aroused by a desirable smell, he's not able to compose the mind. Cannot endure tastes. It's when a bhikkhu tasting a flavor is aroused by desirable tastes. And cannot endure touches. It's when a bhikkhu feeling a touch with the body is aroused by a desirable touch, and thus he cannot compose his mind. That's how a bhikkhu cannot endure touches. So the point here, as some of you noticed, like when I sent that email out, is that when it came to the comparison with the elephant, the whole thing was about enduring battle, discomfort, fear, threat, faltering and flinching in face of all of those prospects. But then when it came to the comparisons with for the bhikkhus, it talks about pleasures. It doesn't talk about bhikkhus enduring pains and so on. And that's because the entire training of the mind, training of the elephant, training of the battle, it's on the level of where the desires are. So generally, when an unpleasant feeling touches you, you might have a desire to get rid of it. You might have a desire against it, but that desire is not as deeply rooted, to put it that way, as a sensual desire. So it's not a desire that will be pertaining to a lot kind of more, existential prospects of engaging with the world on account of your desire. And it's also something that, even for some mundane reasons, you can convince yourself to endure. Like, if you find a good reason, you will endure hardship, you will endure hunger, you will endure discomfort. But it's hard to find a good reason to endure saying no to your desires. So it's not accidental that this is not mentioned, because more or less, as I said, pretty much anybody can muster up determination or a sense of will, if motivation to put up with ascetic practice or with this or with that. But nobody will accidentally be practicing sense restraint. Nobody will accidentally choose to stick to saying no to their senses repeatedly and so on. So that's why the battleground and that whole thing revolves pretty much on the level of where your desires are, where that pressure is felt. But so the point is that if somebody is not trained in enduring these 5, there is no samadhi. There is no mental composure. Of course, it doesn't mean you should not try to be composed, but you have to recognize that if you are still driven and taking for granted the desire that pressures you on account of sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, you are disqualifying yourself from the establishment of samadhi. So it's not an accident that the whole training of an unfaltering mind, a non-flinching mind, comes through training of the in regard to desire regarding sight, sound, smell, taste, and touches. So the sutta obviously gives this comparison, then continues and says, okay, so how is then the royal bull elephant worthy of the king? And it says, well, it's worthy because he can endure the sights. He doesn't falter at the sights of an infantry division of elephants, the battle. He doesn't get scared. Same goes for sounds, same goes for smells, same goes for tastes, touches. And such elephant is worthy of a king. So then in the same way, a bhikkhu is worthy of offerings if he trains in regard to sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, but again, not trains blindly through ascetic practice of avoiding sights, avoiding sounds, avoiding tastes, eating only once every 6 weeks or something, because that's the training. No. Training in regard to desire, the prospect of desire that arises on account of a taste, on account of a sight. So it's not as easy as just avoid sight, sound, smell, taste, touches. Of course, in the beginning, you have to start simply through withdrawing yourself through the overwhelming amount of sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, so that you can train in regard to the desire that would be provoked by those. And same, if we stick to the example of the elephant, you would not be immediately throwing a wild, untamed, untrained elephant into the battle. Like, obviously it will run away and it won't fight. But sometimes people kind of confuse or take too far the recognition that, okay, so I do have to avoid sight, sound, smell, taste, touches to some extent. Thus, I will adopt a view that those must be avoided, and the more I avoid them, the better, the closer to nibbana or some sort of freedom from craving I'm getting. But that's not correct. So you need to avoid it, relatively speaking, avoid the obvious unwholesome ones that they simply have no practical value or any benefit whatsoever. But then you actually have to be training the mind in regard to those, not just be saying no to them. So that's kind of the main gist of this sutta. So I did ask, what constitutes enduring of sights, sound, smell, tastes and touches? You're not enduring these battlegrounds, to put it that way. You're not enduring by just blindly saying no or trying to deny the fact that your eyes see and get attracted to sights, your ears hear and prefer sounds, your nose likes smells, and so on. It's like, to be able to contain them, you need to be able to not act out of them. So when I keep talking about enduring things on the right level, that's what the right level is. Basically, enduring things on the right level means containing things on the right level. And when you contain them, that's where that whole training develops. So it's like, how would you train an elephant that's not used to the battle drums, the smell of feces? Well, by exposing it to it in a controlled manner, so that it gets used to, so that it can overcome its inherent tendency to flinch and look away and run away. The next thing I asked was like, why is the sixth sense, the mind, omitted? The first reason is because by training the five senses, you are training the mind. You are developing that. But the second reason is, you will not be able to say, not act out of the delight towards phenomena, towards images, towards ideas, if you haven't been already sufficiently trained in regard to sight, sound, smell, taste, and touches. So, all those talks when we talk about not allowing things the center stage, they do kind of pertain to that later stage of development. Obviously, you should be considering it and aiming for it. But the fact is that unless you are an elephant that doesn't flinch in face of sights, sound, smell, taste, and touches, there is no training in regard to the images in the mind. It's simply you're not seeing it. So in order for that to be really like clearly outlined, defined, in the peripheral and so on, that mind and images, this training, the training of the battleground, needs to be cultivated for as long as it takes. So that kind of leads to the next question, which is like, how does the battleground simile translate to your everyday life? Where is the battleground? Where do you look for the battleground? Do you just go and start saying no to random things to experience the battleground, or do you sort of need to fabricate it in your mind? But I think by now, obviously, the answer is relatively obvious. It's like where your desires are. And that's another thing. See, there's that sutta that, I can't remember which one, but there's a layman talking to the Buddha, and he said that, well, he was kind of impressed with the Buddha's teaching, because he said, like, when he or they as householders hear about giving up sensuality, giving up desires, giving up the engagement with the senses, that feels for him like a sudden abyss, like a precipice. It's that type of fear. When you hear like, oh, you got to give up the sensual pleasures of the world. So, and that's another reason why the simile does not refer to the painful feelings that a monk has to endure, because they do not necessarily bring that, as I said, deeply existential kind of threat that a person used to sensuality would feel when they hear or find out or even try to say no to their desires in the beginning. So this layman was telling to the Buddha, like, oh, it's amazing that, your teaching and the monks seem to be enjoying doing it, because when I hear about giving sensuality, it just feels like I'm just at the edge of a massive abyss, a precipice. So you get like full on that anxiety and panic. So that's where the battleground is. Battleground is on the level of saying no to your sense desires, keeping the lid on your actions, and you're going to start experiencing anxiety, doubt, mental pressure. Elephant will try to make you, let it run away, allow it to go away. And that's really where the training is. So it's not even so much about the sight, sounds of the drums and so on. It's about what they invoke in the mind that's not trained. So you can imagine like, through the course of our rebirth, we were all at some point fighting in some war somewhere. So if you were to imagine, say you were with some small army sitting on top of some, I don't know, in some valley, on some land somewhere, and you just surrounded by the sounds of enemies' drums coming from the mountains, coming from everywhere else. And it's like, you're going to feel afraid, because see, there's lots of implications in those sounds now coming your way. And but see, it would be easier then. And I'm sure that what happens in wars and these battles, how they used to be fought, it would be a lot easier to then just charge or run away. Like, okay, if you can run away, you run away. You can't run away, it would be easier to charge in the battle, even if it's the tenfold army that's waiting for you, than to stay there and listen to the drums. That's the point. Because that's unpleasant. That discomfort comes from inside, comes from that abyss. And it's like, and as I said, I'm pretty sure that's what happens in wars when somebody gets too much on that psychological level. They just charge. They just charge with a knife against the, I don't know, guns and so on. Because it's easier than to stay on that level. You know you're going to die, but at least it will end. That's what you think at the time. And this is the same point. See, you start practicing the sense restraint, saying no to your sensual desires, say that would have been uninhibited beforehand or up to that point. Well, you're going to feel like your whole entire world now that surrounds you is the world of that threat of that desire. So even if it started through like saying no to a specific thing, specific object of your desire, it's very quickly going to become that all-encompassing abyss. And that's the training. That's the whole point. That's why the virtue comes first, so that when you get overwhelmed with doubt, with everything else, I don't know what to do, well, you know what not to do. But see, staying on that level, even when you know that it's a training, it's something that you need to keep reminding yourself, because it will be easier. Well, if you're not giving in to sensuality, that would be the easiest. That's the least resistance option. But say you would have built up enough determination, value, faith in the teaching, so you are not giving in, you're not breaking the precepts. But then it does there is a real risk to go then too far, to be like the one who charges the at the drums to end it, so you don't stay on that level where that anxiety and doubt persist. So it would be easier then to say double down in your efforts, say no to more things, withdraw yourself even more, concentrate even harder. Why? Because the sound of the surrounding battle drums is driving you insane. But you realize the only true way to deal with it, the only true way for that elephant to be developed as well, is to stay with it. And that would be the true, warrior. Because whether you charge at the battle drums or you run away from them, or say you choose to, I don't know, concentrate on your nostrils or watch your sensations until you forget where you are. Hypnotize yourself basically into forgetting the drums. And then you're seemingly peaceful. And then you wake up. Then you come out of that state. And then you still have to deal with the drums. You still have to deal with the mind that flinches in face of the drums, because you haven't addressed it. But if you actually persevere on that level, don't lose yourself in self-hypnotic practices, don't charge blindly through like doubling down in efforts and self-torment and so on, don't revert back to sensuality, the elephant will get used to. It will not flinch. Even if the drumming continues for 3 months, like, the elephant will be calm. And then you realize whatever happens after that, whether there is an actual battle ensuing or no, you already dealt with it. Through training your mind on that level, it has already addressed the battleground. It has already addressed the battle and the enemy. Whichever way the battle goes, it becomes secondary, becomes unimportant. So that kind of answers this question as well. Is it still somewhat possible to compose your mind before training in the enduring of the 5 objects? And as I said, if by that composing you mean, start investing effort in your precepts, in sense restraint, then yes, it's possible to compose your mind. But if by compose your mind mean, can you, through concentration practices, speed up the process of getting used to the frightening battle drums? No, not a chance. It takes you away from it. As I said, you hypnotize yourself away, so it's gone, and when you come back, it's still waiting for you. So it never addresses the root issue, which is that the mind flinches, falters in face of the abyss. in face of saying no to sensuality. And then, people have asked, like, so why is a bhikkhu not being worthy of offerings if he doesn't train in this way? And I guess, again, by now, the answer should be obvious, because if there is no training in regard to sight, sound, smell, taste, touches, well, there is no training in the Dhamma. So the answer is simple, like, he's not worthy of offerings because he's not the one practicing the Dhamma. And consequently, the one who is training in regard to the senses is thus training in samadhi, is thus training in Dhamma. And that's why he is worthy of offerings. So the unpleasantness of the senses is what cannot be endured, as the name of the sutta says. And in a way, yes, but then in another way, no. So the unpleasantness of the senses is what kind of makes you look, of your senses, is what makes you look past them. Because they're, as we spoke before in our, in other talks, how that inherent patiga, that resistance towards your own sense bases, they're uncomfortable, they're burden, they're exposure. And because of that, by default, underlying tendencies make you look past them, make you look elsewhere, which is obviously going to take you to their counterparts, sight, sound, smell, taste, touches. So technically, what you cannot endure is the fear that arises on account of removing the access to their counterparts. And then obviously the unpleasantness, the inherent unpleasantness of the senses is, sure, fueling that fear even more. But fundamentally, even if you are, say, trained, if the elephant is trained and there is no more fear or faltering in regard to the sight, sound, smell, taste, touches that try to trap you or pressure you, you would be feeling that unpleasantness of your senses for as long as the aggregates don't break apart. And you don't even need to think about specifically having to endure it or something like that, because there is no more fear arising on account of not being able to escape the confinement of those senses through engaging with sense objects. So the second question is, how is aroused by a desirable object to be understood? And yeah, that's again a good question. So what constitutes arousal? Does seeing agreeable things immediately mean desire is there? How do you know where the line is? Like, you see something you like, does that mean, so sight of that already means a desire? Or is there some space, so to speak, in between before it becomes a desire? Well, it depends. Sometimes if your behavior hasn't been checked, seeing it will immediately mean a desire. But if you would have been practicing restraint, keeping the virtue, seeing the things that of the agreeable nature, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, will not immediately give rise to the mind of desire. And you will be able to see that difference. Through practicing of the sense restraint, that's pretty much the purpose of it, is to highlight and pretty much expose a difference between, which is factually agreeable, factually preferable, and then the thirst, the desire, the pressure that overtakes the mind. So aroused by a desirable object refers to the mind being overtaken towards its thirst, towards sight, sound, smell, taste, touches. So the reason why this is important to distinguish is because, again, you could easily fall into, as I said, that doubling down effort and just saying no twice as much, because you implicitly are blaming sight, sound, smell, taste, touches for your desires, for the arousal. And if you keep doing that, you will keep overlooking the level where the problem is. And is the underlying tendency of fear displayed in the elephant somewhat present in the bhikkhu as well when facing sense objects? Yeah, certainly in the beginning. Like fear, anxiety, doubt, pretty much the 5 hindrances will be the 5 ways that an untrained mind will keep trying to get you to flinch, to falter, to run away from the drums that are scaring you, or run at them. One way or the other, it wants to make you act. And that is always kind of underneath all of that, it's always going to be that fear and doubt. And that's also, like, you could see where the power of faith would come in. Like, because, sometimes you can reason, sometimes you can remind yourself, through the right mindfulness that, well, this is staying on the right level. But sometimes none of that will be heard by your own mind. And then just out of faith, you just have to stay at that level. Because as frightening as it is, it's the safest place to be. Running away will probably get you killed because you're surrounded. Running at it will certainly get you killed even faster. So neither running forward nor running backward will at least give you the most time. But that means you do have to stay on the level of that mental unease. And that's far harder than, as I said, even just charging in the battle with a pocket knife or something.